Hello everybody, it's Foo here with a cheeky upload for you today. I will be talking all about the Pokemon ability Cheek Pouch. I think this is actually a really good ability that's very underrated. Most people don't realize how good it actually is, and I'll try to convince you of that in this video. So though it's not an overlooked Pokemon, it's like an overlooked ability, and it's kind of along the same lines as some of my other videos. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, please leave a like because it'll let me know that you enjoyed it and I might be able to do more of these. And it also helps the channel out at the same time, but if not, that's fine too. So without further ado, let's get into the video. We'll be talking about Cheek Pouch. Cheek Pouch is an ability. What it does is it restores the Pokemon's HP in battle when it eats a berry, which seems maybe quite limited on the face of it, but actually it's a pretty neat ability with a lot more functionality than a lot of people realize. Now what I'm going to do is go through 3 reasons why this is underrated. I will first kind of talk about why people think it's bad, and then I'll talk about why it's actually pretty decent, and then I'll talk about why it's actually pretty versatile too. First off, why do people think this is bad? Well, one of the main reasons, I think the biggest reason, is it's got very limited distribution at the moment. The only Pokemon that get this ability are Dedenne and also Bunnelby and Diggersby. So those Pokemon aren't the best and can't show off this ability to its fullest potential. And the reasons for that are, with Dedenne, I absolutely love this Pokemon. It's actually, cover your ears, Minun, one of my favorite Pikachu clones, if not my favorite Pikachu clone. I think that the color scheme is great. I think it's really cute with the whisker and tail design. It's all chubby and just, I love it. But I would be the first person to say that it could be a lot better in battle, and it's got some really significant flaws. Though its speed stat at base 101 speed is pretty nice, all of its other stats leave a lot to be desired. Its special attack stat is kind of usable at 81, but its bulk is awful. It's just really terrible, and its attack stat is really bad too. So that's sad. It has nice typing though. The electric fairy typing, original Tapu Koko is just a pretender. This thing is the original electric fairy, but it just doesn't do it. I think the main problem though is its move pool, because it has that fairy typing, which is actually usually really good, but it has no special fairy type moves. Its attack is awful and its special attack is usable, but it has no special fairy type moves. It doesn't get Moonblast, which would be amazing because it's really high base power, very spammable, but I mean a lot of fairies don't get Moonblast, so I guess that's permissible. But it doesn't even get Dazzling Gleam, which is a TM, and there is no excuse, and I'm just gonna leave my Dedenne rage there for now because it's very raw and very real, but it's very annoying. I think this Pokemon, it has potential, but it's just got awful stats and an awful move pool, which means that even if Cheek Pouch is a very good ability, it's going to be limited in how well it can use that. It does have some potential, and I'll go through that more when I'm talking about how good Cheek Pouch is, but for now, all you need to know is Dedenne isn't an amazing Pokemon, and I don't think you needed me to tell you that. Then we have Bunnelby and Diggersby. Now these two are actually really cool Pokemon because they do get that nice huge power ability. So they've got a much better move pool than Dedenne, but they do have kind of bad base stats to start with. Diggersby is much bulkier but a lot slower, and it has really bad attacking stats, but then you pair that with the huge power ability, probably one of the best abilities, if not the best ability in the game. One of the only abilities that can take like an objectively bad Pokemon and make it one of the best Pokemon in the game. It's so good, and so Cheek Pouch never gets a look in. You just won't ever see a Cheek Pouch Diggersby being used in a battle, unless you're very dedicated to gimmicks, which I kind of am, but even I struggle to bring myself to use this thing. So though I like these rabbits a lot, very hard to actually use Cheek Pouch with them. So that, I think, is why a lot of people think that Cheek Pouch is bad. It's because, so yeah, Dedenne is pretty bad. The rabbits are pretty good with their huge power ability, but without that, their stats are pretty low. But you shouldn't throw the Flabebe out with the Flabath water, because actually it's a pretty good ability, and I'll talk a bit about that now. Now let's look more at the positives as to why it's actually a lot better than people think it is. And I think the best way to do this is to compare it to some abilities or some strategies that are already out there. And a really good comparison to make is with Gluttony and the 50% berries. So what these are, that in this generation in Pokemon, since Pokemon Sun and Moon, some of the pinch berries have been buffed. So when your Pokemon's HP drops below 25% health, they get healed by 50% of their health. As long as you don't have the wrong flavor, your Pokemon won't get confused. So this is actually pretty decent healing. The only issue being that you have to get into that tight 25% range. But with the ability Gluttony, they activate when your Pokemon's HP drops below 50%, which is much more achievable and basically means that it's pretty reliable 50% healing for anything that can hold that berry with the Gluttony ability and has the move Recycle. It basically gives Pokemon that don't have reliable recovery already a really nice form of reliable recovery, and there are some very significant users of this. Pokemon like Snorlax and Alolan Muck, which are really bulky, have setup moves and now can use this reliable recovery system. It's really good, and understandably it's a very popular strategy. But Cheek Pouch is better than this. Objectively, and there's no argument about this, Cheek Pouch is just better than that because of the healing that it provides. So Cheek Pouch heals your Pokemon for 33% of their health when they eat a berry. The difference between Gluttony is that berries don't proc early, so you don't eat your berries when you drop below 50% health. Except for the citrus berry, which you already do that. Now the citrus berry only provides 25% healing, but with Cheek Pouch's 33% healing on top of that, when your HP drops below 50%, you're healing back 58%. So that is objectively better than the Gluttony and 50% berry combination. It activates at the same range, but you get more HP back, which is amazing. So if you have Recycle and the citrus berry and Cheek Pouch, that's a really, really good recovery. That's better than a lot of reliable recovery moves already that only heal 50%. This is doing extra healing on top of that. So just with that fact alone, Cheek Pouch is objectively a good ability because Gluttony and the 50% berries are seen as good abilities for Snorlax and for Alolan Muck. Cheek Pouch is a good ability. It just doesn't sit with the right Pokemon. But on top of the really nice healing opportunity that this ability grants your Pokemon as long as they get access to Recycle, you do have a bit more versatility than that. And this is where really gimmicky sets come into play. And I know you guys like a gimmick, but all I'm trying to say with this is Cheek Pouch is already very good and you can play around and have a lot of fun with it, whereas you can't do that with other abilities. So what Cheek Pouch can do is aid Pokemon that don't get very good setup moves. And this is where Dedenne actually comes in again, because it does have a very limited move pool, but Cheek Pouch gives it some facility to set up which it wouldn't have without the Cheek Pouch ability. So what you can do is give these Pokemon berries that can boost their stats, and while you're boosting your stats, you're regaining health because of the Cheek Pouch ability. I'm going to talk about 3 sets here, so we can get a bit creative. You guys can get some inspiration to try some stuff, and we'll all just have a good time. The first one I want to talk about is Key Berry. So what the Key Berry is when your Pokemon's hit by a physical move, you can eat your Key Berry and it will give you +1 defense, meaning that the next physical move that you get hit by will do less damage. At the same time, if you've got the Cheek Pouch ability, you'll be healing health when you're eating your berry. So basically, every time you get hit by a physical move, you'll get +1 defense and 33% healing. And when you've been hit by enough physical moves and gone for a cycle, you will be healing more health than your opponent is dealing to you, which is pretty interesting and a really unique strategy that you can try. If you do this with Dedenne, you can pair it up with moves like potentially Charge, so that you can boost up your special defense at the same time. Recycle is necessary to keep your berry going and your healing going. And it does have things like Parabolic Charge if you want to get some recovery with a draining move back. You can use Super Fang, you can use Toxic or Nuzzle. All these moves are pretty neat little status moves and ways to keep your Dedenne healthy while getting all of those defense boosts as your opponent attacks you, and it's a really interesting strategy. I think it's pretty neat, and it's using a berry that you don't get to see too often, and I really like that. I think that this is showing off like an underused ability and an underused item really nicely, and an underused Pokemon in general. So give that a go if you want a bit of a gimmick. It's not the most viable thing, but it can work out in some certain situations. Another potential set is using a berry that boosts your offenses. So an example of that is the Bataya Berry, which you can use with Dedenne. As I said, it's kind of got usable special attack. It doesn't have the great move pool to go with it, but if you go with Thunderbolt and HP Ice, you really need to substitute for this set because Bataya Berry only activates when you're at 25% HP or less. So with Substitute, you have a bit more control over your HP gauge. You can go for a sub as your opponent goes for attacks, and make sure that you get into that 25% range when you'll then eat your Bataya Berry, get healing. If your opponent isn't doing enough damage to you, you can then recycle and get lots of special attack boosters. They're chipping away but not quite managing to take you out. And then with all your special attack boosts and your decent starting speed anyway as a Dedenne, you might actually be on for a late game Dedenne sweep. It's possible. It's not easy, but it is possible. Maybe with screen support this will work a little bit better. But yeah, it's really, really fun. If you're able to sweep your opponent with a Dedenne, I can tell you that there aren't many better feelings in Pokemon. It's just hilarious. And this is also going to say, this is what you can achieve with a Dedenne. Can you imagine what you can achieve with other Pokemon that would benefit from this ability? The last set we're going to talk about is pretty much the same as the previous set, but using a much more fun berry, probably one of the most fun strategies in the game, and that is the Staff Berry. Completely random. Basically, you need to get into that Pinch Berry range again at 25% health. You'll eat the Staff Berry, get your healing, and you'll get +2 in a random stat. Now, what's cool about this one is if you're using the Substitute set, basically any stat apart from attack that you get a boost in will be helpful. If you get because if you want to sweep, you generally want to get speed and an offense. So in this case, it would be speed and special attack. But if you get defense or special defense, that means that your opponent will have a much harder time doing enough damage to you where they take you out. It means that they're much more likely going to be doing less damage than you're healing with your recycled Staff Berry, and that is so funny when your opponent just keeps attacking you and you're keeping getting these boosts by recycling your berry. It's just the most hilarious thing in the entire game. I can't advocate this set enough. It was one of my crowning moments as a player. I've already done a video on this Staff Berry Dedenne set. It was definitely one of my crowning moments in competitive. It was so funny. My Dedenne got so many boosts and I was able to sweep my opponent. And I can't advocate this set enough. You need to try it out. It's so fun. If a better Pokemon got this ability and could use this Staff Berry Recycle set, it would be so cool and I would love to try that out. So that is basically my argument for why Cheek Pouch is an overlooked and underrated ability. I think that it can provide Pokemon without reliable recovery like better than normal reliable recovery. You get 58% health recovery, which is so good. And also it allows Pokemon that don't have great setup moves an opportunity to set up with a recycle set as well, which is really cool. I just think it's a really interesting ability. It's definitely overlooked, and I'd love to see more Pokemon with better stats and move pools get it, because we could really see the full potential of the ability. That's going to be all for today. So you guys in the comment section, let me know if you've got any fun Cheek Pouch sets with Dedenne or the bunnies, and let me know also which Pokemon you think would really benefit from having the Cheek Pouch ability, because that will be interesting to hear too. That's going to be all from me. I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.